All right, folks, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to May's Datacom Community Update webcast. Before I hand you off to the team, we have a lot of stuff to cover today. But before we get into that, just a couple things. If you have questions along the way, and we always hope that you do, please use the questions box along the right-hand side of your screen. I will see those, I will read those, and we will get through as many of those as we can during our time together today. If for some reason something requires a little bit of research or we can't answer it in this forum, I'll make sure the team gets everything that they need to follow up with you after the session is over. We are recording the session, and the replay will be available either later today or first thing tomorrow morning out in the Datacom community. And the last thing from me is we always want to make sure these sessions are valuable. So with that in mind, a short survey is going to pop up at the end of the webcast. If you could stick around and give us some feedback, I know the Datacom team would appreciate it. That's it for me, so take it away, guys.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today, we'll be presenting a few of our latest enhancements delivered as part of Datacom 15.1 continuous delivery. This is our standard disclaimer slide, which we're obligated to share, stating that this presentation is for informational purposes only and is subject to change or withdrawal at any time without notice. So I wanted to begin with a quick snapshot of the roadmap slide we presented back in February. In February, we presented a long list of enhancements that the Datacom team has delivered in the past months and years. And today's session, we're actually going to focus on some updates to that. So in May, you'll see that we have now delivered a few more enhancements that were priorly just planned, and we'll be presenting hash join for SQL Optimizer, ideal online transaction table management, and our VSAM support for pervasive encryption enhancements today, as well as touch on a few others. We'll provide a good overview of each enhancement and allow questions after each session. And then we'll, at the end, cover a little bit of what's coming up next and then close with some announcements. So very quickly, we'll go on to our first presenter, and I'll present to you Richard Williamson, who is our Senior Principal Software Engineer, who's going to be presenting about hash join.
Good morning, everybody, at least morning for me. We can go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about hash joins, a little overview, why you like it, and how hashing is really done, and what you have to do to turn it on, and what happens when a memory limit is reached. Okay. So this pretty much summarizes up the whole talk on one page. It's a new join method, and the optimizer will select it, but you can also manually select it. Its main purpose is for ad hoc queries where there's no good index on the inner table of the join. So if it's more of an operational type query that has an index, then it's not for that. It's for the cases where you don't have a good index. And the hash table is built in 64-bit memory, and we have some limits to control that. And I think that's about it. Next page. Yeah, so as I said, it's mostly used for joins where you have no matching index, and it is also used for correlated quantified subqueries that build up possibly a large number of entries for the subquery, and then before that it would be in a temporary table that would have to be sequentially searched. But with the hash, of course, it's very fast to probe that table directly, and can make a world of difference for those subqueries as well as joins. So it is the fastest method when there's no matching index. Before, we probably would have used a sort merge join, but if you had SQL optimization level set, that would only allow a merge join on the first one, and you know, even if a merge join was used, our tests indicate hashing is even faster than that. So it's a great new tool in the tool chest for SQL to use. Okay. Next slide. So if you're not familiar with hashing, I'd like to think of it as a kind of temporary index. In other words, a fast way to randomly access rows, because it is actually using a nested loop join. Each qualifying outer table row is probing that inner table. And if you had an index, that's how it would do it. But if you don't have an index, then the hash table provides that quick access. Okay. So we didn't want the optimizer to select a hash join when it wasn't the fastest, so we're sort of conservative there, meaning that there are going to be cases where even if you did have a matching index, it would still be faster. And so there's a way for you to use this Datacom optimization equals use hash join in the on clause to force a hash join. And likewise, if their nested loop happens to be faster for particular cases, you can say use nested loop join to force that as well. So you have the override capability. And when I say there's no matching index, there is a use case where the first column of the index is low cardinality. Maybe it's company number, and there's like 1, 2, 3 companies, and that's not specified in the join condition. Then CVS's skip sequential processing will use that key just about as fast as if it was restricted. So the optimizer does take that into account and considers that to be a matching index and doesn't use hashing in that case. So it's a little smart about what it means by no matching index. Yeah, and if you had a sequential table like a nested table expression or materialized view, of course, they don't have indexes, and hashing would always be used there if in lieu of a nested loop join. And yeah, I think that pretty well covers that. So how do you turn it on? It is off by default. You must turn it on. And you do that by specifying the muff parm hash muff mem limit with a value greater than 0, because 0 is the default, which means it's turned off. Now, we strongly suggest that you set that size to be whatever you're using for a virtual TTM, because pretty much we're replacing temporary tables with hash tables, sort tables, temporary tables for subqueries, that sort of thing. Pretty much one for one are now going to be hash tables. And if you do that and you are not having errors running out of that memory, then hopefully you won't run out of this memory either. So that's a good value to use. But if you're not constrained too much, then you might set it to the maximum, 19 gigabytes, and it's only going to be used if it's needed. If you want to go that direction too, but at a minimum, we suggest you make it at least as large as your virtual TTM. Now, if you were to turn it on and then for some reason want to turn it off, you can do that by setting it back to 0. And then any queries that had been bound to use it next time they're executed, we'll see that it's been turned off, and it will automatically rebind those to not use hashing next time they're tried to be executed. Now, in addition to turning on the feature with this parm, the decision is made at bind time, so the queries have to be rebound as well after it's been turned on. So you would want to flush your source cache by setting one of those 2 parms for 0 and then set it back, or cycle muff. And then for the embedded SQL and static queries that are in the dictionary, you would use their SRF program. And I've got a slide to show you how to do that later. But just keep in mind, you turn it on at the MUF level, and then each query has to be rebound because it's a bind time decision. The second parm is just to keep a particular query that is for some reason going to sort of hog all of the memory from preventing other concurrent queries from running that don't use really much base at all. So you can set this limit lower than the MUF limit. Now the query limit can't be set to 0 to turn it off. So if you turn it on, you don't want it on, then just set it higher than the overall MUF limit, because then the MUF limit would get hit first, and that's like not even having it set because it would never be reached, if that makes sense. Okay. Now we do have a new table that you can use to report on hash tables if you care to. And we wanted to put that in a new database versus 1000, because later we might want to make that a permanent table and save some history across MUF executions. And we have some work coming up with source cache to capture snapshots to compare at different points in time. And some of these tables will be virtual. Later, they might be real data in them. And so base 1000 just doesn't fit too well for that. So we have in the PTF, the hold references you to and delivers SAMP JCL member to create a new base 1016. It happens to do it using the SQL method instead of data dictionary utility. So it's pretty easy to do. All right. Yeah, this is how you turn it on for batch queries with the SRF SQL rebind facility. You would normally use the parm to select whatever plans you want. Plan, asterisk dot asterisk would find all the plans. And then we've added this new keyword hash. Why? Because we didn't want to rebind all of your plans and find the ones, of course, that could use hashing. But what about the ones that couldn't use hashing? Now you've rebound them. There's a small chance that statistics have changed and it would come up with a different plan that just might not be as efficient as the current plan. So we didn't want to, fix what was already working, right? And so the hash parm says, yeah, rebind everybody, but if it didn't use hashing, then don't change the plan, just leave it the way it is. So when you do this, you're safe in knowing that nothing's going to be affected except creating plans where the hash feature is going to be used. All right. Now, what happens when a hash limit is reached, either one of them? Well, we wanted to make sure that anything that had been running for the last 20, 30 years continues to run. So although if you set that limit to the same size as the virtual table, it's not likely that you would have one of these limits reached. But if it does happen, we're going to take care of that. The current that hit the limit will be, of course, terminated and its resources released. It's going to be marked, indicating that it hit a hash limit, so we won't do that again. And it will save that in the disk so that is remembered across MUF executions. And of course, if it's in a permanent plan, that will normally happen, but even if it's in the source cache, that will happen. On SQL sysout in MUF, there will be a nice message that says this query hit the limit at this value, which limited hit, and the number of rows that had been loaded at that point. So if you can estimate what the total rows would be, then you can extrapolate to see how much memory it would have used to give you an idea of how big you need to make it. And then the queries rebound, not to use hash tables, and restarted. And if it was working before, it should complete again and return successfully without any interruption. So in this case, we're hopefully very few times, but if it did happen to run out of above the bar memory, the query would still complete. The application would not even know it happened and would run just like it normally does. Obviously, it would take a little longer that first time because of the attempt to use hashing, but it would not receive any SQL code. Now, if you did use the Datacom optimization parm to force hashing, then that restart does not happen, because we took the decision that if you wanted that, it was like the option of not using hashing would be so slow you just didn't even want to try it. So that does override the restart feature. You can use the SQL Performance Analyzer. It will show the memory used for hashing. So you could like sort that and find out if there's any queries getting close to any of the limits. And if we go to the next page, it got some more stuff to handle this. Yeah, so there's that message. And basically it's the same what I just said, so we can go to the next slide. So I'm open for any questions that you might have. Hope that you will turn this on. It can make a world of difference in those cases where you don't have an index, and if you're doing some kind of analysis, you really don't want to create an index for 1 or 2 times of use, and this will provide you a way to run some queries that before might have been just too impractical. And the same goes for both joins and large subqueries. So I thank you.
There aren't any questions in the queue so far, so we can keep going.
Welcome, this is Joe Lynn. We're going to talk about the new feature of Datacom, which is the ability to use linear VSAM data sets. Let's go ahead. So we're going to talk about it in several different kind of directions, and so we'll hit some of the topics more than once, but we'll talk about the Media Manager, which is the tool that Datacom uses within ZOS to actually do the I/O. We'll talk about the various parts of that. We'll talk about performance, because that's one of the questions that always comes up. How we rolled it out, CXX changes, data sets, restrictions. Let's go ahead. So this is an overview, and I'm going to talk about this in more detail, but we can now use VSAM linear for data sets, not just the EXCP. And we think, I explained why there's reasons why we think it way better. You're not forced to do this. There's a process to do this. Let's go ahead. So again, we're using more operating system tools, whereas with EXCP, we had to do a lot of the work ourselves. Now we're going to let ZOS do more of the work. It will allow us to perform I/O in SRB mode. With EXCP, that was not possible. It will move more control blocks into 64-bit. Most users do not have a problem running out of 31-bit, but some do. And there's also 24-bit memory that EXCP requires. And there's a couple of clients who have restrictions because of the amount of 24-bit. In any case, all of these control blocks are in 64-bit. It will automatically use the high performance FICON feature. Datacom spent about a year implementing that in EXCP, and here it is for free. So everybody who switches to VSAM, it will be taken advantage of without how Datacom did it with EXCP. Pervasive encryption, Some sites consider this very important. This is just an option that you pick. It is all done outside of Datacom DB. We have to activate it. We're involved in it, but we don't do any of the encryption process. I think it's, from our point of view, it's certainly much easier than EXCP. From your point of view, it should be very similar. You allocate a data set in one way or the other, and then you kind of mostly forget about it. Let's go ahead. So this is kind of another review. We're going to talk about the rollout, the performance, etc. So let's continue. I wanted to talk about this, and I want to set expectations as not high. Datacom is architected to minimize the number of IOs that occur. Almost every user has tuned the environment, the particular multi-user, to minimize IO. So there's not so much IO driven. You may see a lot of IOs happen, but the bottom line is a lot of things occur that means there's not so many. And because we don't do a lot of IOs, the difference between an EXCP IO and a VSAM IO is not, it is, VSAM tends to be better, but it's hard to be measurable. So that's what we say. Do not expect to see a visible difference in the CPU time or the elapsed. There should be some, but it's hard to be measurable. One of the big points is VSAM linear is the newest. Okay, it's going to have the newest software techniques done. It's going to be the newest hardware and simply a little bit faster. So whether it's measurable, you can probably argue, but it is faster. And so we think that people will move to, or should move to it going forward. Continue. It is a very major feature. Okay, it's not such a major from your effort, but from our effort. And so almost all of this is just not visible or truly measurable to you. So I want to put together kind of this is a roadmap. If you have a private QA environment, and a few clients do, I would pick the biggest, busiest area. I would stress test it with your available regressions and then compare your results. This is what you're going to see the best you can. And so a lot of sites just don't have a QA environment, or they have a very small one. They'll start usually in a test system. If you have a test system, start with one area. After several weeks, convert additional areas, and then let some time pass as you vet that. We want you to be very conservative and cautious and a high degree of success. Once you get to production, start with low volume areas that have low impact. Should there be any concerns, you want to minimize any risk. We've been very happy and very successful with it, but can't foresee the future. Start with areas that can be closed. The initial case is you would logically close data sets, reinitialize them as VSAM, load them, and continue. There's options around that, but in the beginning, we would like low volume data sets. So in our testing, we have many reasons we think it is better, and we believe that most people will long-term get to it, but each client will have their own path. Let's continue. CXX, we built this as a level set. So it is a CXX level option to allow VSAM. You do a CXX made option alter, you say yes to VSAM, and you can turn it off with a no to VSAM. We want it to be clear that you are activating it. When you activate it, you can then on the init and the pre-init DB utility functions, you can add a type IO equal VSAM, or you can have a type IO equal EXCP. We will default it for the init function. Because we have chosen to do this as a level set, we have also applied some best practices rules. So these are best practices, things about the CXX or the multi-user execution. We think most users are already doing this, and we want to encourage everybody to do it. So with VSAM, we will actively force you to switch. We'll switch on your behalf, and so that everybody is running the same way. Okay, these are how we think you should be running, and it'll provide the best success that you'll have. For example, the data fast search, the high use, these are all little optimizations that have existed for sometimes decades, and we're trying to push you there because we want everybody at a high level and a very supportable product. For the EXCP, if you're not, for the data sets not VSAM, we will force the IO style newer, which is just a more efficient EXCP. So it's still EXCP for the data sets you do not move, but it is more efficient, and it uses also less 24-bit memory in particular. Let's go forward. So for each data set, you will define it. So with EXCP, you normally did it in JCL. Here and in VSAM, you can do JCL, maybe not all the options, but you can use JCL, but most people would use IDCAMs. You define a cluster with a cluster name, which is equivalent to what your old EXCP name was. It will be linear. You'll provide a data class and a storage class. The data class, there's certain requirements that we will have. You can't just use any data class. And so we're going to have an entire report that will help you pick a data class, or help you if you have to create one, how you would define it. We want it allocated in cylinders. The control interval size is the block size. And the next two options are simply requirements. And then you'll have a data, which is the cluster name .data. So the big rules has to be linear, needs to be EATTR. It needs to be, the initial implementation was to have reuse, but now we have switched it to be no reuse. And then the share options 3,3. We do require SMS because we want to keep it, it's much simpler. We want to keep everybody in the same simple strategy. Cylinder aligned, one stripe for now, and it has to be on the 3390. Let's continue. So for each individual data set, when you do the init, you could add the type IO equal. For the init, if you don't add type IO, we will open what the data set, the DD name points to, and if it is VSAM, we'll use VSAM, and if it's EXCP, if it's not VSAM, we'll use EXCP. At the initialization, the CXX has to have that VSAM yes set. Once you have initialized it, we will let you talk to that data set forever, but you can't reinitialize it unless the VSAM is activated. One of the rules for VSAM is that it requires us to be authorized. Almost everybody is running DB utility authorized, as multi-user has to be, but what this is that a few users run DB utility not authorized. You simply can't go to VSAM. DB utility must be authorized for VSAM. Keyword volumes is allowed, but in VSAM that's done differently, and so it's ignored. The init will perform basically all of the editing requirements, and there are many rules, and so as you look at it, you'll see all of the requirements that we are enforcing relevant to VSAM. Let's continue. For an index area, the block size will default to 4K. It can be 4K or 8K. So if you want 8K, you have to pick a number larger than 4K. Numbers less than 4K will be rounded to 4K. 4097 and higher will be rounded to 8K. Old EP equal no is required. You can't say old EP equal yes. This will default for bases 256 and above. It must be specified for bases below 256. This is because of the way the defaults have always worked in DB utility. The index format needs to be format 2. That will default for all databases. It'll be an error if you try to set a format 1. For data areas, we have 4 block sizes. We have 4K, 8K, 16K, 24K. VSAM linear has many restrictions. Datacom has more than VSAM. So there's a few that VSAM would allow, we do not, but this is the set we allow. Continue. So because, well, most users that are using, most users happen to have an average of 4K data blocks. That's not everybody, but that's the biggest number of users. So there's no issue with DASD going between EXCP and VSAM. Both are 4K and you have the exact same size. What I wanted to point out in this slide is for the users that have optimized your 3390 such that you have different block sizes. The 3390, because of it has one of those 4 sizes, you're going to lose bytes per track. And I'm telling you how many bytes per track. So at 4K, you would get 737,000 some bytes per cylinder, and that number goes down if you have other block sizes. So what it all means is if you're going to switch from a block size of like 27998 to the 24K in VSAM, it will take more tracks, i.e. more cylinders. So it's not a lot more, but it's a noticeable more, and you need to plan for that. Let's continue. So a conversion without an outage, we allow online area move if the block size is the same. So if you're doing an online area move, you're all 4K, for example, what you have is you'll pre-init a new VSAM area with type IO equal VSAM. You'll specify the old EP format. If it's an index, you have to say IXX area equal IXX, and these are the data area block sizes. And so you might have a data area block at this size, but you won't likely other than 4K, but you could. In any case, the online area move will do it without an outage whatsoever. You simply use the online area move to accomplish that. So it moves all the blocks. It's a block mover. It moves the blocks from the old EXCP data set to the new, and it updates the CXX. We do require you to go to a new DSN. So if whatever the old DSN is, you'll have to have a new DSN when you use online area move going to VSAM. And if you later want to move from VSAM to VSAM, you'll still have to change the DSN. The CXX is updated automatically for you, but if you have any JCL that does the inits that specifies the DSN, you would have to correct them. Block alter is what we have, but it's not currently available to you. It's in validation testing. It's not totally available. It is a row mover, so every row is moved. It's not a block mover. Each row is moved. Each row must be logged as it's moved, so it's certainly slower than online area move. If you have a 4K block, use online area move. If you do not, then this will become available at some point. It is definitely slower than OEM, but it will put things in order. So the good thing about block alter, which is it will reorder the data into the native key. So it's a perfect reorganize. So it reads the data in the old area native key sequence, adding it to the new area. We've touted this over the last several years. It's existed for EXCP to EXCP. You can right size a data set. Online area move doesn't like to make it smaller. It doesn't make it smaller in data that exists, but this allows you to right size it. So there's attractiveness to the block alter. Let's continue. Some of the restrictions, we will not do a data area with a table that has DB table encryption. There's not many users doing this, but there are a few. You cannot use it currently for the CXX, LXX, FXX. You cannot use it if you have a muffplex with a coupling facility. So you can have a shadow without the coupling facility. That's fine. That's what most everybody does. But you cannot have it with a shadow that has a coupling facility. And we do require that the common module in memory PCC has to be current. That shouldn't be a problem. Everybody should have it current, but that's just a requirement. Let's move on. So there's a lot of messages to show what we did. Messages relating to online area move, block alters, and inits and pre-inits. And so this is just a sample. Let's continue. These are messages. Users don't usually activate open close messages, but if you did, we have messages. The messages will be different. The VSAM open close will have a slightly different message than an EXCP. Provides a little bit more information. Let's go ahead. Extend messages. VSAM does extends a little bit different. VSAM can have more than 16 extents per volume, which some people will like. VSAM can also extend the last extent. So even if you have a volume that has 3 extents, you might extend it 50 times and still have 3. So so VSAM just extends a lot different than EXCP. Some people will definitely like that. Let's continue. There's basically one error message, but it has a lot of specifics as to telling you exactly what we were not happy with or what error we got from the memory manager. Let's continue. We have a couple of warning messages. You probably won't see them, but we have a couple of warning messages, and then we have one return code 76005. Let's continue. So that is the basics. It's major internal. It's not so major to you, except that it's very major because you have to convert every single data set. So some users may not do it because they simply don't have the resources or time to do it. But so it is an effort, and the more data sets you have, the more the effort is. But we definitely think it's a good thing, and we think over time we will encourage people to migrate towards VSAM. Any questions?
Len, any questions in the submitted as of yet?
Great, thank you.
Still no questions.
All right, then we'll move on. And my name is Becky Midley, and I'm going to present a new feature we have in Ideal for online transaction management. Next slide. So we're going to give a brief overview and then talk about the benefits and new abilities you'll have for your Ideal transactions with this feature. You go to the next slide. So this is going to be our overview of what this feature does. It's going to give you the ability to update your Ideal transaction information individually, and you can do it in production environment without an outage that would affect all your other users and applications. And the one bit I'd like to point out with this is this was kind of done in 2 stages. We had initially addressed the 24/7 problem for terminal transactions with the SCUMTran table a while back. And this is going to replace that as well as your SCASTran and SQUEBTran tables, all the assembled tables you have for Ideal transactions, with the exception of SCUTran. If you go to the next slide, we'll get into some of these details mentioned here. So yes, this is going to be the new way of defining and maintaining your Ideal transactions going forward. The session control facility will still use your SCUTran, but it's going to be just for like your product startup, your splits and swaps to like DDoL and what have you. Is going to make use of lists and groups pretty much in the same fashion as RDO and CICS. You'll have a list for each region that will have your groups for all your transactions. This uses a single memory table that's going to be used for all of your transaction types, so no splitting them out based on the transaction type like the assembled tables were. And that lookup in that table is going to use the hashing to reduce your search time. And this will be built, it's going to be stored in the VLS ID DAT file. And so we'll build it from that file at startup. And this gives you the ability to use just VLS util to transport groups to other regions. And it's also going to allow the maintenance of your transactions to be decentralized. Before you'd have your set of assembled tables that you'd have to coordinate all your changes to reassemble those tables, and this is going to be all done online. So multiple people can be making these changes without affecting other transactions. So we'll go to the next slide and we'll get into that a little bit more. So yes, all updates now can be done entirely online. And because they're going to be done online, this is going to give you the helpful editors in Ideal to help you get it right. We do at least a fair amount of checking to make sure your program names are in the correct format and versions and what have you, but we don't do, currently we don't check to make sure that all those entities, programs and members or whatever exist. We're currently contemplating and assessing additional enhancements for the additional validation for those items. But we've left it that way for a few reasons. It gives you the ability to predefine everything, so you can add all your lists and groups and transaction definitions before those programs or members exist. So that you'll use those list and group editors. You can rearrange all your definitions. You can add and update all your entries, delete your entries, and then we have an install and remove commands that are new that will let you install a transaction immediately using a primary or a line command. And you can do the same with remove. You use the line command to remove a transaction before you delete it out of that group. And I think that's most everything there. If we go to the next slide. So this is also going to give you a little bit more granularity and flexibility for your transaction definitions as well. You'll have the ability to change just a single transaction instead of the whole set. You can install and remove just a single transaction. Then you can also group your transactions any way you desire by the application or system. That gives you, so that then you can install and remove that entire group. So if you could group by the application and then say, okay, I want to move this application from region A to region B, and you just move it over, and you can bring it up, define everything in that new region, and you're good. You can move the entire group to another list, which this is going to essentially add those transactions to that other region. There's going to be one list for each region that's going to be named according to that region's sysid. And then we also have the ability that the groups don't have to be part of a list. So this would give you the flexibility to use a group for like temporary changes. You can install the group and have that transaction available, but then if it's not in a list, the next time you come up, you bring the region up, it's not, that transaction is going to go away. You can also accumulate transactions in a group without adding it until all of the pieces are in place. And I'll go to continue on. And this is also going to give you some improved clarity. It's going to be easier to see what transactions are running in each region. You can go and look at that region's list and see what groups are defined for that region. It's going to help simplify the management for the multi-region systems, because each region will have a list named according to that region, instead of, all regions having a SCASTran and have to make sure that SCASTran is in the right library for the right region. Everything's going to be, each region is going to be named according to that system and easy to find. And then for each region, we have a new command that's going to called display transactions. That's going to show you what transactions are currently installed in Ideal and what group it was installed from. It's going to be searchable, and it's also cross-checked with the PCT. And then the display PCT is not a new command, but we have it made some tweaks to it to cross-check it with the Ideal transaction table. So it's going to show you the other side of what transactions are defined to CICS that use the session controls facility or the web driver. And it's also searchable. And I believe that's most everything I have to cover, and I believe that's going to take us to our questions slide.
No questions. There are no questions at this time.
All righty, perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for presenting those features to us. Here's a summary of our enhancements that we delivered. Our SQL hash join and the PTF number LU05231 for those interested, and their linear VSAM datasets enhancement with pervasive encryption, LU04745. Ideal online transaction management, that PTF will be coming soon, and if you'd like to join us in validating that feature or getting an early access to that feature, please reach out to us for our customer validation program. And as always, to learn more about our enhancements, please visit our tech docs online. So Len, you want to kick off the first poll?
Yep, here we go. As a reminder, folks, these two take a few seconds to be distributed, and once I start seeing votes come in, we'll leave it open for long enough to get at least most of you the opportunity to vote. All right, people are starting to vote, so we'll do another 15 to 20 seconds. Okay, people are still voting, so I'm not going to close it while people are actively voting, so we'll leave it open a little bit longer. And I'll just keep an eye on the response rate. All right, it looks like it's slowing down, so we'll do another 5 or 10 seconds. All right, thanks very much, everybody. Nikisha, are we just going to do these back to back to back to back?
Yes, the next
Okay.
one are, how do you feel about VSAM linear dataset with pervasive encryption enhancement? And you can select all that apply.
All right, people are starting to vote now. All right, let's say another 5 to 10 seconds. All right, thanks everybody.
And then the next poll is, how do you feel about the ideal online transaction management enhancement? Again, you may select all that apply.
All right, people are starting to vote. Let's say another 5 to 10 seconds. All right, thanks very much, everybody.
And so the next section is, we want to give you a little preview of what's coming up next in the Datacom roadmap. I'm actually going to pass over to Dale Russell, our product owner, who's going to talk a little bit of our items under consideration.
Good morning, good evening, everybody, afternoon. Yes, things are on the horizon, on the drawing board, things we're looking at, things we're beginning to explore. We've talked about this in our roadmap, and so now we just kind of want to touch base again. We're looking at creating a business data REST API, an API that would let you read your own data files as opposed to the API we currently have, GA, which allows you to read Datacom's dynamic system tables. The SQL Performance Analyzer, Dick mentioned in his presentation that some of the information about looking at performance of queries and how they had done in relation to limits would be available through the SQL Performance Analyzer. That's not yet GA, it's also in validation testing right now. If you have interest in that, then please let us know. We'd be happy to talk to you about joining with us to do some validation testing. We're always looking at doing additional syntax, and we have a number of things that are on a list that we'll get to as we have resources. Periodically, we talk about, excuse me, MUF parameters and how we can simplify them. We've in the past, in a few cases, changed the default of a parameter when we know we have a better default. In some cases, we have decided to override certain parameters. Everybody does it this way, so we'll ignore what you say because we know we have the best answer nowadays. Things like that. That process will continue. We're looking at the possibility of integrating with mainframe operational intelligence, or MOI, also MRI, mainframe resource intelligence, and we're looking perhaps at a better integration with mainframe application tuner. Some of you use compression in your data sets and maybe have multi-table areas where tables have different record sizes, block sizes. We have some work that we've thought of, we're calling it DSOP 6, which would help use the space better for those compressed tables. We're looking at the possibility of enhancing the security in the SQL Performance Analyzer beyond where it is today. And then in the background, we're wondering customers if they have need for a security technical implementation guide, or a STIG. So these are all some of the things that we're thinking about and we're looking at to do in the coming months. Next slide. We have a poll here, and Lynn, if you'd help. The question is, do you want to talk to us about any of these enhancements that I just talked about? So if you are interested, select any and all that apply. The Business Data REST API, Systems or Business actually, the SQL Performance Analyzer, things about better ways to monitor your environment in general. I didn't mention that in my slide, but that's another thing that we're looking at is, are there better ways we can do and better tools we can put in your hands to help monitor your environment? Simplifying parameters or DB utilities, and then the DSOP 6, improved DASD utilization. Let us know if any of those or all of those are things that are interesting to you.
Thanks, Dale. I've launched a poll, but no one has voted yet, so we'll give. All right, votes are starting to come in now. So we'll give everyone another 20 seconds or so. Let's say another 10 seconds. All right, thank you, everybody.
And then our final poll is call it other. It's a catch-all. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk to us about? If so, please choose the first option. You would like to have a meeting with us, and we'll get with you to set something up.
Yeah, Dale, this is actually my chance to apologize. I actually was not able to get this one added. So, so folks, if you do want to have a meeting with with the team in the post-event survey that pops up. That there's a section for any other comments or questions. You can put that right in there.
That'd be great. Or you can always email Nikisha or me, and I believe our email addresses are on an upcoming slide as well. Back to you, I guess, Nikisha.
Thank you. Well, we're reaching the end of our presentation, but we want to end with just reminding you of some ways you can partner with us. We have our communities board on our community.broadcom.com, and our Datacom cadre community has an opportunity where you can submit ideas and also vote and comment on ideas that are important to you. We also have our Datacom validation program. We present to you on a monthly basis new enhancements such as these, but it gives you a chance to get early access to these features while in development, so that way you can influence change and direction. And as always, we will continue with our monthly webcasts, such as the one we're doing today. And we have an ongoing series of our second Thursday each month. And we have also begun our quarterly office hours. Speaking of which, our next office hours will be on Thursday, June 9th. It'll be a chance for you to hear topics and also bring your questions to the board and to the group here. We can share new feature ideas, enhancements, have live Q&A. It's a good chance for networking with each other, as well with partners and other the cadre user group leaders, as well as all of the Datacom product leadership team and engineers. Also want to bring to your attention, we have our mainframe vitality program still going on. It's a way to partner with us to resolve skill gaps. We get to train next generation of Datacom DBAs, as well as provide hands-on labs and experience, so the way of providing low-cost training to you all to meet your skills and learning challenges. And just as a reminder, enrollment now is open, so please reach out to me if you're interested in the next session. We have our US-based Vitality session, which will be virtual again this year. That will be starting in the end of August, and then the EMEA training session will be starting at the end of October for the Datacom portion. And then my last announcement is just a reminder on our Broadcom Mainframe Technical Exchange, which will be October 4th to October 6th. Hope you all can attend. We will have a Datacom track this year, and we are in planning, and we're looking for feature session suggestions. So if you have a particular topic that you would like us to cover at the MTE, please let us know, or reach out to the cadre board leaders and let them know what topics you would like us to present on. And now, before we end, I'd like to open the floor for any other questions or comments.
Thanks, Nikisha. There actually aren't any questions, which is good in some ways because we are at the top of the hour and we want to respect everybody's time. So we'll go ahead and wrap up now. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and we'll talk to you on June 9th for office hours. Have a great day and the rest of your week.
Thank you very much, everyone.